All right, I'm rolling here. I've got Dave Dorman, the award-winning artist science fiction. We got horror, fantasy illustrator. You're most known for Star Wars, I would say, obviously, but you've also been involved with what? DC, Marvel, Dark Horse Comics. I mean, what am I
Right.
missing?
Well, I've dealt with a lot of the major comic book companies because that's what got me into artwork, and so it's just been a love of the medium all my life.
Mhm.
But I've also done toy designs. I worked with Hasbro for about 7 years, working on the GI Joe toy line. I designed Aliens toys for Hasbro. I've worked on storyboards and presentation artwork for movies and TV. Oh, geez. I've done gaming artwork, Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering, and just all sorts of different types of things. But it leans towards science fiction and fantasy because that's what I love.
Right. So, just for you today, well, look what I wore today.
I see that.
Guido. You know,
Yeah,
I grew up in an Italian household, and we called him Guido.
we know.
I thought he was an Italian bounty hunter that was green when I was younger.
Hey,
And then look,
that wouldn't surprise me if that's where the origin of the name came from.
6 years. Look what else I got here. I got the child.
I got the child there. Yep.
Yeah, Build a Beer. My girlfriend's an
Oh,
obsessed Star
really?
Wars fan.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, she was just at the opening for uh, Star Wars at MGM in Orlando. What is that? Galaxy's
Oh,
Edge.
Galaxy's
For the
Edge,
grand
right?
opening.
Yeah. I haven't been there yet. I've seen lots of pictures, had lots of friends go down. As a matter of fact, a couple of friends and I were planning on a trip in the fall, but don't know if that's going to happen now. We'll see. But I'm pretty excited about going myself.
Nice. I'm looking at myself here. If I take these off, I look like Lobot from Empire Strikes Back.
You do. You do look like Lobot.
So yeah, I want to clarify something before we get too deep here. If we're going to go into Star Wars, which obviously we will, is I'm a Star Wars fan. I am not an obsessed super fan like, say, my girlfriend is, or like a lot of my friends. I got like my buddy who's Mike Mango, who lives and dies with Star Wars. I have a friend called Sky Canoyer. He travels to all the conventions, obviously Comic-Con and all them, MEGACON,
Right.
but also internationally to go to just specific Star Wars conventions.
Wow.
And Ed Sanchez, he's a very well-known director from the Blair Witch. He's a friend of mine, and he's one of the biggest collectors of memorabilia and artifacts from Star Wars, I think, in the world.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, so if we ever connect on Facebook or anything, he's great. I've seen all the Star Wars films. I grew up loving them. I've also, what was I going to say? One thing I'll say about Star Wars, I'm a filmmaker, so I really dove into George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola's partnership is what I became more interested in throughout the years, reading about those two collaborating.
Sure.
So
yeah, it's an interesting dynamic with both of those. They're very different types of filmmakers, but they share their love of the craft.
Yeah, I love the two of them. We don't have to go on their path because of what they're struggling originally, and even with George Lucas making a short, THX, then making it a feature, and it not becoming what he wanted it to maybe become.
Right.
And then going on to do American Graffiti, and then obviously into Star Wars, and Francis Ford Coppola making The Godfather 1 and 2.
Right.
Very interesting dynamic there. I love that aspect.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very cool. It's sort of sad that neither of them really got the recognition that they deserved. Certainly Lucas is the Star Wars creator and director, but I think that he never really got the opportunity to move beyond that. and Coppola, I think never really got the respect that he deserved with the movies that he was making. And it's sort of sad to have lost that potential over the years for what they might have been able to create if they had a little bit more support within the industry for their individual projects. I mean, Coppola had a lot of personal projects,
sure,
but he struggled to get them done. If he would have had a little bit more support and advocacy for those films, I think that he would have been a much bigger film than just a much bigger filmmaker than just the name of a director who creates really interesting films. You know what I mean?
I got you there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. It was very interesting, the career path he took after The Godfather 2, doing like The Wanderers, Rumblefish.
Right.
He kind of went with the youth, which with The Godfather, it was kind of middle-aged or elderly to a certain degree, right?
Right. Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
But I think it's though the same with Lucas when he went on to do American Graffiti. You know, he chose material like Coppola did that was very accessible at that point.
Yeah, what was dear to his heart, kind of too.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
You know, I think they followed their energy, which I got to give them a lot of credit.
Yeah. Anyway, we got off the track. Sorry about that.
We got off the track there. Let's just jump back into you. You're kind of, and I've been to a lot of comic conventions, and I even I live in Orlando, Florida, and I've been coming here since I was 5 years old, lived here from 18 on, with the exception of San Diego for like 6 years, which obviously Comic-Con's there.
Right.
I grew up loving comic books, probably like yourself, but you are kind of a legend amongst the comic convention. What you kind of say? I mean, what do you think?
I've been around a long time. I don't know if I'm a legend per se. I've been fortunate to have been involved in a lot of really high-level projects, and so that's really helped to build my career and certainly build my fandom. But you know, I'm just a guy who's been lucky enough to do all this great work, and I love to share it with my fans. And you know, fans come out to the shows, and you know, they want to see, you know, their favorite people, and I'm happy to get out there and you know, I don't know if we'll be able to do this anymore, but shake hands and give them a smile and thank them for you know, supporting me over the years. And it's always such a pleasure to get out and hit the convention circuit and see everybody around the world who has really enjoyed my artwork. And so, you know, the legend thing, I've been around for a while, but it's good to meet really the people who in essence are my employers, because if the buyers didn't like my artwork, the publishers wouldn't hire me to do the work. They'd hire someone else who the fans liked. And so for me, it's the fans that's the end of the retail product for me, that are the ones that make it possible for me to continue doing the work that I love. And so to have that connection, it's a very rare business where you can do something and then get out and meet the people that you're doing it for. And it's very satisfying to go to conventions and just share in that wonderful experience of enjoying, you know, similar things.
Yeah, I was an obsessed comic book fan when I was much younger for many, many years. I even ended up purchasing Star Wars 1 and 2 with my father back in like 1980. And I think he spent $20 or $30 on that for me, which if you go back then, he thought I was out of my mind.
That's crazy prices back then. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was in, I think, Florida. I don't know if I was at a convention. I can't even remember where I got it. I was so young. But he purchased those for me, and my daughter ended up becoming an obsessed Star Wars fan when she was younger. and she was in love with Darth Vader. I even had Darth Vader come to her birthday parties. I got the full-size Darth Vaders.
Right.
And when she turned 16, I gave her Star Wars 1 and 2 as a gift. She never knew I had them. I had them in a safe.
That's nice.
And I just was talking to editor-in-chief of Boss Man Magazine, a friend of mine, how we grew up, and I think maybe you did too. Magazines and comic books was our true entertainment. I think when we'd go with our parents anywhere, if we could go into a 7-Eleven, a Walgreens, Five and Dime store, grocery store,
bookstores for me too. I read a lot of science fiction and fantasy books as well, so it was just a lot of reading for me when I was younger. And yeah, you go to the mall and you know, I'd want to go to the bookstores, and you were driving by a 7-Eleven, and I'd want to stop and see if there's any new books new comics on the rack, you know, at that store. And you know, my parents were very supportive of that. They weren't quite as supportive when I said that I wanted to be an artist, as you know, to make a living. But I joke, they were supportive then. They just were hesitant because, you know, like a lot of parents, and I think nowadays still, they don't realize that art is a valid way of making a living, not just comic book or fantasy artwork, but art in general. You know, graphic design, architecture, you know, 3D design. It's a much bigger world than I think a lot of parents realize. And when I go to do lectures and such, I try to, you know, stress that if parents are there, yeah, it's a very valid thing. So support the kids, you know, if they're interested in art. And yeah, so I loved going to you know, bookstores, and I was living in Maryland when I was younger at this time, and the University of Maryland would have, you know, a comic book in the basement of their student union, like every 6 months or something. And you know, it was I don't know if you know what years you were. This would have been in like 75 and 76. But it was like at the start of you know, real sort of conventions, and so you get a lot of these you know, middle-aged hippie guys and you know, young guys who are selling their books. And this was before bagging and boarding, so it was just boxes and boxes of, you know, that wonderful, you know, newsprint smell when you go into one of these rooms. And it was yeah, I went to shows, I bought books, you know, at the time, Howard Chaykin and Bernie Wrightson and Walt Simonson and a lot of these guys who were in the mid-Atlantic area, who were going to school there and you know, in New York. That's where I met them first, when I was, you know, a drooling fan, and they were, you know, just had a couple of their books come out from the major companies, and you know, they'd be sketching, and I'd be, can you sketch me a drawing, Howard? So you know, it's great fun, sort of seeing that, and then, you know, after years, you know, telling them, after I sort of became a peer with them, telling them the stories of being a fanboy, you know, as we're sitting at a convention, you know, having a drink, and you know, and really they weren't that much older than I was at the time, you know, 4 or 5 years older maybe. But yeah, the early days of comic book fandom was really exciting for me, at least, being able to see more than just what you saw on the stands. And seeing that whole, you know, history of comics sort of in boxes, you know, in front of you in this giant room. It was very cool, and you know, I've been there my whole life.
Yeah, and I kind of grew up where, you know, I was an athlete, but I loved baseball cards too, or you kind of did comic books. I mean, that's what most, I can't say all kids, but a lot of kids were involved with. I loved comics for some reason so much because I think I loved film and I loved fantasy. And I was even banned from bringing comics to school because I got caught reading my comics all the time. And then I even had one of my favorite comics was Journey into Mystery, which was Thor's, I think, original series. I had number 17. So I was kind of, and then when I got Star Wars 1 and 2, you know, certain things would catapult you like anything else. Like my cousin had a Babe Ruth card and whatever. In your case, I love this so much. I actually, here, I'll bring this up. I might as well. My second feature film I did, I said, I'm going to do a video game and I'm going to do a graphic novel. I'm going to market all three simultaneously. So I did a video game with Full Sail University, Real Education in Orlando, Florida, Winter Park. They created a video game which went on to win Best Independent Video Game in San Francisco. And then I was working with somebody who did Assassin's Guild. I don't know if you ever heard of them. The guys that did the comic for Assassin's Guild is who I ended up teaming up with. And after working for a year, someone stole all our stuff. I was heartbroken.
Oh, really?
My graphic novel we were going to create, it was called Insanity.
Wow.
And I learned so much about the process of how to create and how much work, all the way down from obviously writing it to all the way down to inking it, right? All the different levels, how much time it took. In your case, let's kind of start from the beginning here with you. Did you want to be a comic book or a graphic novel? Did you just want to be a novelist?
Well, no. Back in the day, there weren't graphic novels per se. When I was growing up, it was really Marvel and DC, you know, buying books off the stands. And that's really where my interest came in. And I can remember having comics as far back as when I was 5 and 6 years old. But to be honest, I don't remember really reading comics until I was about 10 or 11, because I'd buy the comics and just look at the art. You know, I wasn't interested in the stories. I really liked the art a lot. And, you know, it got to where I was able to recognize different artists. And then, you know, when I started reading them, I thought, wow, this is really fun. So, you know, my interest was really, you know, really born with the art in the comics. And so, you know, all up through high school, I dabbled in drawing. I really hadn't thought about making, you know, anything of it. I just loved to sort of copy the drawings in the comics and see how to make, you know, the form and the figure and how to draw different things. And I just enjoyed doing that in my spare time. And, you know, by the time I got into high school, I got pretty good, but still not really deciding where my future was going to go. I was playing football in high school. We were state champions in 1975, and I was a junior. So in the senior year, I was planning on working as potentially getting a scholarship with a school. And, you know, getting, you know, football to pay for my education. And then I'd figure out what to do, you know, after that. And then, you know, halfway through my football season, I banged up my knee, and that was the end of my career. And so, you know, really in my senior year in high school, I had to make some hard decisions on what I was going to do with my life, because, you know, college was not going to be paid for anymore. And so I made that decision. I said, I like art. I'm going to do that. And so once I made that decision, I started drawing seriously. You know, I had encouragement from my high school teachers and you know, feedback and, you know, it was good. But, you know, up to that point, it wasn't something that I considered seriously. But once I made that decision, I worked very hard. I went to 1 year of liberal arts college in Maryland, but that was more for painting. And at that time, I didn't have an interest in painting. I wanted to draw comics, and that was my love, and that's what I wanted to do. But I couldn't, you know, find a curriculum that was teaching graphic arts. Now, almost every college in the country has graphic arts and illustration.
Absolutely.
back then it wasn't. It was if you could get into a liberal arts college with an art major, that's about the best you could do. So that's what I did, and I went for a year, and it was fine. I learned a bit, especially about art history, which was nice. But it wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to do illustration, and liberal arts is more fine art and gallery painting and modern art and blah blah blah, which I had no interest in. So during that year, I got information about a brand new school that had just opened up in New Jersey, founded by Joe Kubert.
Okay.
And Joe Kubert was one of the grand old men of comics. He started in the 40s and eventually moved his way up the comics industry, and in the 60s he was an art director and artist for DC Comics. He created with Bob Kanigher most of the World War II comics from DC, GI Combat, Our Army at War, Enemy Ace, just brilliant. He did Tarzan for them. He did just a load of stuff. And he was always a great supporter of wanting to grow the industry with new young artists. So he started this school. And so I talked to my parents, and it was a fairly expensive school. It was a 2-year school at that time. And all it was strictly drawing comics, how to create comics in black and white drawing. They didn't have any color.
Inking.
Well, no, it was inking, but no color work. So
Gotcha.
you would learn how to create a page of artwork, complete all the way through the black inks, and then hand it over to the colorist, or if you're going to color, you can do that. But it was just creating the basic what it is to be a comic book. And so I went there for a year, and I had started to dabble in painting about a year before that. At liberal arts school, I did painting, and I was comfortable with that. And part of my portfolio in interviewing with Joe was showing both my black and white artwork and my painting. So he knew that I was interested in painting. And as I went through that first year at the Kubert School, I found that my interest sort of shifted more to creating a single image rather than creating continuous panels on a page. Because I'd do the panels, but I'd spend more time on each panel, making each panel right, before telling a story that the eye can follow. So that's really where I found that moving into painting, creating that one image that tells the story, was really my strong point. And because the school didn't have any type of color curriculum at all, Joe and I had a conversation at the end of the year, and he basically was very honest, especially considering it was a brand new school and they needed money to stay alive. He said, point blank to me, he said, "Dave, we don't have anything more we can teach you in the direction you want to go." He said, "I know you want to paint, and we can't give you that." He said, "You could stay if you want, but it would really be useless to the direction that you want it to go." And that was really honest. And that's, I think, why Joe he passed away a few years ago, was one of the friendliest, most loved guys in the industry. He was very honest with everybody, including the young artists coming up. And so I left after the first year, and I moved home. My parents lived in Florida at the time. And so I moved home, and I talked to my parents about what I wanted to do. And I said, give me a little bit of time. Let me stay here. I'll get a part-time job and, help pay for stuff, but let me stay here. And I want to learn what I want to do. And I want to spend what would be school time
Right.
If I went to college, here, just sitting at the drawing board and drawing and painting and getting better at my craft.
Sure.
And I did that. I did that for 3 more years, building my craft and my reputation. Well, not reputation, but my craft and my portfolio.
What were
And
you drawing then? What were you drawing then? Because obviously it wasn't Star Wars or any of
no,
those.
it wasn't Star Wars. It was well, it was Star Wars to an extent because Star Wars came out in '77. This
Okay.
would have been '78 through '80 or '81. So
Could
Star Wars
you?
was a big influence on me visually.
Okay.
It was very exciting to see that type of visual storytelling and that type of uh, realistic special effects and a worn out culture on the screen.
Absolutely.
And I had seen a lot of that, especially with foreign comics, with Mobius and Bilal and a lot of these guys that were coming through Heavy Metal magazine here in the States. They were drawing all of that stuff.
Hmm.
So for me, it really opened my eyes quite a bit to what the potential was for taking those science fiction images and not being the clean, pristine work that was associated with science fiction at the time, science fiction artwork at the time. So that was a big influence. I was still influenced by comics. I was painting samples of Batman and Captain America, and I was doing some of my own science fiction stuff. And at that time I was just working, building my craft and making my portfolio, going to shows. This was before the internet, so I would have to, gather my portfolio and take it to New York, and I'd go once a year and see some publishers, Marvel, DC, some paperback publishers, Heavy Metal magazine, and
Yeah.
uh, you know, that's how it worked. And eventually, in 1981, late '81, I went to New York, and in that trip, I stopped at Heavy Metal magazine,
Hmm.
and they purchased a painting from my portfolio for the cover of Heavy Metal magazine,
Wow.
which was just astounding for me because I had been reading it for like 8 years, seven
Yeah.
years,
That's a great
and
magazine. Yeah.
yeah, and so that was my actual first professional sale. And from there, that same trip, I went to Marvel and sold a cover for Savage Sword of Conan and made some connections. And then, with that, once I got my foot in the door, I could leverage that, saying, "Yeah, I'm a published artist now. Look." And
Sure.
other people took a chance, and that started the ball rolling as far as my career goes. I still at that time I was doing some black and white drawing for certain publishers for their comics because not all publishers were doing fully painted covers at that time. It was sort of a, a new phase in the industry. The technology has sort of caught up with making really nice reproduction on covers for full color artwork, as
Gotcha.
opposed to the standard comic book, flat color. But there were some publishers that were still doing flat color, so I did some, black and white line work for those. But it was still really just single illustration work, and that's where I built my career, was doing that, just staying with creating paintings and images that
Sure.
tell a story. I still have my love for the continuous panel comics, and I have done some continuous panel stories, but nothing extensive. Just subject matter things that I really love to sort of keep my foot in the door, per se, of the industry that taught me how to draw.
Yeah, that's incredible. So let me ask you something, because like someone like yourself in your past, when you were creating certain images, say it was Captain America or Star Wars, you could
Right.
sell those legally because no one knew about that, or they allowed it
No,
back then? What was the
no,
leak?
that's a real gray area in legal terms, because even though the character itself is copyright or owned by another company,
Okay.
I am creating a new piece of artwork as a single entity.
Hmm.
And even though I'm using their characters as the subject of that, um, I can sell that as one person to another,
Okay. I always
but
wondered that. Okay.
but not for reproduction.
Right. You can't make a series of, say, 50 of them, number one, two,
Right,
three,
exactly.
correct?
That's where the gray line turns into black and white. Once you start making multiple copies of a piece, that goes into copyright infringement.
Okay.
But a single piece, um, no, they sort of look around that a little bit for the most part.
Hmm.
The only people that I've really encountered with this was Disney. Disney tends to really uh, uh, crack down on people and institutions that use their artwork, even for the simplest things like painting Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck on the wall of a preschool.
Sure. And they don't allow that.
Um,
Right.
they don't allow it because the
No.
preschool's making money and they're putting it up, and
Yeah.
Disney might consider that advertising, and that's an income generating thing on a regular basis for
Yeah.
them. So I can understand that. I don't think it's right because personally, I don't think it's right because all that does is give them free advertising, Disney free advertising. The kids are seeing those characters all the time, and so they're saying, "Yeah, let's go see the new Mickey Mouse movie or watch Disney Channel or
Right.
something," because it's always there. But lawyers don't tend to see things that way. So, so yeah, it's always something that I'm worried about nowadays with Star Wars, and the single pieces that I do for commissions and for clients,
Sure.
because I know that Disney keeps the real iron fist with that. But yeah, as far as doing sketches at shows or having private commissions, there's no real problem with that.
Gotcha.
That's actually a lot of my work right now is with no shows to go to, not meeting the fans, getting
Hmm.
a lot of contact with the fans through the internet, and wanting to purchase sketches that they would normally buy at shows, or have me do a small painting or something. So uh, that works out. But yeah, and to follow up on that, I have had licenses with Lucasfilm and 20th Century Fox to do limited edition prints.
Right.
So
That's what I was
I
going to ask you. So,
right, so I'd enter in a contract with them that I would pay them a certain royalty, and we'd have a limitation on how many copies I could do, signed and numbered or whatever, and then I'd be able to make the prints and sell them. But the bigger the character in the fandom, the more expensive it costs, to get that license. So
sure.
um, I've been priced out of the Star Wars market as far as me personally doing prints. There other companies have approached me, and I've done work for them now.
Hmm.
They have the license, so they hire me to do the painting, and then they publish it. But yeah, that's really the best and safest way to get prints done.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bootleg stuff going on. Well, some artists not as well known or as popular tend to um, think it's okay to do a drawing of Batman and make 50 prints down at Office Depot and bring them
And
to
then
shows.
sell them at an art show, like a local art show, right?
Right.
Yeah, you see that all the time.
Yeah, and technically that is a copyright infringement.
Sure.
Do they crack down? Not really, but you got to be aware that at some point they might. And so you can't be a crybaby about it. You got to understand, what you're getting into.
Yeah, I remember even in the 70s, we lived in Chicago, but on the outskirts, there was somebody who put Jimmy the Cricket outside, I think their hair salon or something. Disney got a hold of them then. And then me living in Orlando, there was, you see all these people trying to incorporate Disney into their brand when they're, I think that's what gets tricky. So say a daycare center has Mickey Mouse or Disney or something, and then they get busted for doing something inappropriate. People think they're affiliated with them, which, as you know, you've done shows even at Celebration. They were involved with Celebration, and now they're not, which is kind of interesting. They built an entire town around the Disney atmosphere, and then all of a sudden they removed themselves from there entirely, but it still looks like Disney.
Right. Yeah. But that's business. Things really did change. Well, things changed in 1996 at Lucasfilm when the prequels went into production.
Okay.
And Lucasfilm grew very, very large when I was dealing with them back in the Dark Empire days when I started working with Dark Horse and Lucasfilm. I could call, and I knew everyone that picked up the phone. So, that is nice to, talk to friends, talk some business, get some reference if needed. And that was very friendly. After they started on Phantom Menace, it just grew exponentially.
Loaded.
And so the people that I were dealing with had moved on or left the company, and so it was a whole new slew of people, and that's business that happens. And then when I found out in the 2000s that Lucasfilm was selling to Disney, I said, yeah, that's going to happen again, and it did. I don't know. I think 2 people at Lucasfilm now.
Wow.
Everyone else that I've dealt with over the years have gone.
It happens.
Yeah, it happens, but that's business. I'm very aware of the business, having been in it for so long. So it won't surprise me, whatever happens.
Yeah. So let's, what I saw a big boom, because I've been going to comic book conventions and obviously all throughout the United States. If I can't catch one in Canada, which I never did, I'd love to. But what I found interesting after the Spider-Man with Tobey, and then I guess you could say after maybe the Dark Knight with the Joker, but really after Spider-Man, I think the convention, it was always like Comic-Con, obviously in San Diego was always a monster, and I think MEGACON in Florida was pretty big, and you have the ones in Chicago.
Those were a little different breed. I'll let you finish your story first, and then I'll.
I was going to say the explosion kind of happened where, I remember in the 80s, my buddy, one of my closest friends, had a brother, and he did Silly Daddy Comics. His name's Joe Chipetta, and he was telling me when he used to go to Comic-Con, it was in a gymnasium in San Diego, right? It was that small. And that's where you guys kind of used to collaborate and sell and, do your thing. It was kind of, I'm not going to say you guys are like your own hippie environment, but it kind of was your own environment, right? Even the ones I'd go in the 80s with my father, right?
Yeah.
It was your own world. But I realized over the years, especially, like I said, after it seemed like that first Spider-Man, there was an explosion where they kind of incorporated not just comic books, the film industry, and obviously, then between Marvel, DC, and Star Wars, the 3 of them coming in were of all different films at that point in time.
Right.
DC with the Batman, and then, like I was saying, Tobey Maguire with the Spider-Man, and then Star Wars coming out with their films. It was, besides everything else, it just seemed like it just exploded. And I don't think a lot of younger people realize what you went through struggling. Like it's not anything like it is. I can't even explain how different it is compared to even 20 years ago or 25, how different.
Right. Yeah. It's changed quite a bit from just sort of a small community to being this very widely recognized cultural event,
Yeah.
basically. And you saw that happen. Yeah, about the time that Dark Knight and Spider-Man came out, and then Marvel, started their movies, and
Exactly.
obviously Star Wars was back then. And I think we ended up with a generation of fans of comics who grew up with comics in the 60s and 70s and 80s who are having kids
Hmm.
and sharing that pop
Yeah.
culture with the kids, because in the 2000s and now, you saw a great boom of families coming to conventions, parents bringing their kids.
Like me
And
with my
then,
daughters. Yeah,
yeah,
100%.
and then, the cosplay thing came up about 7 or 8 years ago, I guess,
Hmm.
which, because it was so visual, it really caught the eye of news. It wasn't just, guys in jeans looking over boxes of comics. It was, these beautiful women and these, stretchy,
Of course,
tight
costumes.
costumes, and so it made it much more visual. And that, I think, caught the eye of general population who didn't realize that that was going on.
Hmm.
And kids love dressing up,
My
and
daughters, yeah.
yeah, and so you saw over the years, you saw more boyfriends and husbands bringing their wives to the show, and then you saw them bringing their kids to the show, and then you saw them bringing their kids in costume, and then you saw them in costume bringing their kids in costume, and you can really follow that to see how popular it's become in the general culture. And so, yeah, Comic Cons have changed very much from the collectible, comic thing with guys just bringing their boxes to everything under the sun, as far as collectibles go at a show. Comic Cons are no longer Comic Cons. They're sort
Absolutely.
of they're sort of whatever tchotchke you can find that's cool in the pop culture con. Um, and then, to tie that all together, they started bringing these actors in, and so you're not
Absolutely.
only,
To do the Q&As, and they got to meet their,
yeah,
right,
yeah,
it's
so
like
so
meeting the
you're
hero, right?
yeah, so you're not only bringing the comics fans and the fantasy fans, the science fiction fans, and the pop culture fans. You're bringing in general people who have an interest in that particular show or that particular actor.
Yep.
And by coming there, you're introducing them to a sort of bigger world, as far as this goes. So yeah, it's definitely changed over the years. Um, some good things, some bad things. It's no
Yeah.
longer the relaxing, time for us old guys to just sit around after the show and talk and share artwork and stuff, for hours, after dinner. Um,
Yeah.
now they're just so big, and for us who are getting a little bit older, a little bit more tiring. Um,
Oh, for sure.
but you see the kids excited, when they come up and their dad says, "Oh, this is Mr. Dorman. He did those Star Wars comics that I love so much," and the kids get excited, and it's really a wonderful thing. That magic hasn't changed over the years.
No, and when I used to go to, say, MegaCon when my daughters were real little, I literally had to carry them at 2, 3 years old. And I used to say MegaCon and Comic Con, I think, is like Halloween on steroids.
Yeah,
Like, you get to dress not just for a night, right, or just go to one party. You get to be whoever you love for a few days. And
yeah,
it's not only that, like when I was in San Diego and you fly in, because I've flown in even on the days, and I've flown out. But anyway, when you get to San Diego now during Comic Con, it's like you stepped into another universe, because the buildings, the skyscrapers have, Spider-Man climbing
yeah.
on it. You
It's
have
the
the
whole
Dark
city
Knight.
there. Yeah,
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 and Florida became like that too. And also, what I found interesting is when I used to go to MegaCon many, many years ago, how it kind of was comics, and video games was pretty present too, with Halo and them walking around. Like those were kind of the two strong presents. But then as time went on, kind of more and more things started to get involved, from television shows, like you said. And also what I loved about it too is you'd have old actors. It could be from Buck Rogers, hypothetically, or all Batman. We get it. All the people that I grew up with, you can go get a signature, you could take a photo. Even like Lou Ferrigno was once there.
Right.
Like, and I'm like, what? And then the next thing you know, we're both sitting there flexing. And he's selling his book because he was the Hulk.
Right.
So it really, that part I loved. But then on the other part, the aggravation of it becoming so big, where now you can't even get in Comic-Con, and even MegaCon, or you're in Chicago, and you just can't randomly just walk in there like you used to be able to.
Right, and that's one of the down parts about those big shows. However, if you really, excuse me, I'm talking too much and losing my voice now.
That's why I keep drinking. Look what I got here for you. I don't know if you like it.
Yeah,
another one.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm. I sit in the studio all day and I don't talk to anybody, and I just sit and I draw and I paint, and I listen to my music, and anytime I talk for like more than 15 or 20 minutes, I start getting a raspy throat. So, where was it? Oh yeah, that's one of the drawbacks of the new pop culture conventions is they are so big, but you find if someone's really interested that there are a lot of smaller shows around the country. Even in the big cities, there's smaller shows.
I'm going to go ask you something on that in a minute, because I made a website once called Showbiz Service, and I list all the top 40 festivals, or I should say conventions for comics.
Right.
And it's funny you said that. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off, but yes, there's so many great ones besides New York, Chicago,
Yeah, and a lot of those organizers are finding that it's a good advertising, maybe to get a couple of those stars to come to a smaller city or a smaller venue, rather than have 100 TV and movie stars all at once at the big show. Just have a couple, and the fans really love that, because they're not sort of cattle called through the lines at the smaller shows. They have the flexibility to speak a little bit and share some time with those stars, and those are the shows that I really like to go to. The smaller shows. The big shows obviously have their drawbacks. The smaller shows where you get time to actually talk. For me, I really love that, and I know the fans do.
Yeah.
And I get fans who come up and say, "Hey, have you seen Lou Ferrigno today?" I said, "No." "Oh yeah, I got my autograph and I got to talk with him for a few minutes, and he's a really nice guy." And I shake my head and say, "Yeah, it's a good chance that you got to meet him." So, yeah, it's a good thing, but yeah, unless you're really hardcore and have a lot of money to spend nowadays, I'd say, take a pass on San Diego or MEGACON or C2E2, and look for a smaller show in the local area. It'll cost less, and you'll get as much joy at those shows. Yeah.
I will say the one benefit I do love of the packed house MegaCon, when my daughters were younger, Lord of the Rings just came out one year. Each year there's a new thing. And
sure.
But when I love the people, I'm going to say it out, like the people that dress up, the guys, the girls, they're so friendly. I've always felt so comfortable being around them, even though you don't know who the hell's under the mask. But my daughter, especially one of them, loves taking pictures. So literally, you'll see Vader, Darth Maul, Boba Fett.
Right.
You'll see all the characters. You'll see maybe R2-D2. Who the hell knows what? And you can take a picture with people either dressed or they have it at their booth. It's amazing, to really be able to take. And then what I love too is they show you not only maybe future films coming out, but things in that movie that maybe no one else has ever seen before.
Sure.
And even people are dressing up as these characters that you may have not even seen because they're such,
I know. Yeah,
diehard fans.
Right. Yeah. that's something that, like I say, has come up in the past 10 years or so, and kids love that. They love to
Oh,
see those
I love
costumes
it too.
walking around.
Yeah, I'm taking
And
pictures with everybody.
yeah, and everyone that I've met is so nice and patient. They love having their picture taken, and they love making people smile, and that's a really wonderful thing to share too. So that's a good positive part, and that's not just at the big shows. That's at the smaller shows too. You
Of
get a
course,
lot
yeah.
of cosplay fans coming in as well. So that's a nice spillover.
Yeah, and I've seen documentaries on obsessed Star Wars film. People that are obsessed with Star Wars. And my
Yes.
buddy, I have a close friend actually. I'll throw him out there. I don't care. He's hilarious. Jason Martinez. He loved Star Wars so much he became like where he became a part of the religion. Like he followed from the way the way they dressed.
Yeah.
It's almost, I don't want to say it's a cult, but to a certain degree it is. He fell in love with the whole way of the Force. And my
Right.
youngest daughter,
Right.
who fell in love with Star Wars, we used to goof around, but she became, and I'm going to go into this with you next, Darth Maul. She was obsessed with and Vader. But when she was younger, she'd
Sure.
only wear, Darth Maul clothes. I had to give her all the artists. Everything was Darth Maul. And my mother's like, this is the
Yeah.
devil, because she's a Catholic. She goes, is this kid going to grow up? Like, what is she going to become? Eventually,
Right.
she grew out of it, but she kind of went from Darth
Yeah.
Maul into Darth Vader. But
Yeah.
you've got to run across a lot of these people with your artwork that are just unique
I
individuals, right?
oh yeah. There are quite a few. It's not real common, but it is happening. It does happen with conventions. Um, because I'm so well known with Star Wars, fans sometimes do think that I have like an interview of what's going on, and sort of I know all of the history of all of the Star Wars movies and all of the
Right.
comics and all of the books and all of the unproduced screenplays. And I'm just a guy who paints Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia. So I try to nod my head and do the best I can. But yeah, there's some questions that are just so drilled into the minutia of that um, um, mythology that I just don't know.
Too
And
much.
they're just rattling on about stuff, and I was, oh, I didn't know that.
Right.
And so yeah, and that's fine. I don't hold anything against them. That's their thing. And I sometimes am disappointed in myself not knowing that, because
Yeah.
they're coming to ask me, and sort of expect me to know. But um, it is interesting to see fans who are that involved in the details and minutia of the Star Wars.
Yeah, it's their life to a certain. I mean, that's
Yeah,
their lifestyle to a certain. And I
yeah,
remember back to my daughter, I had the Darth Vader helmet, and she had to have one, and she
right,
had the actual lightsaber from her Godfather, got her the authentic uh, Vader
right, right. The
lightsaber,
master
and then
replica.
I had to get one. And we're running around the house, and I'm looking at her and her. I says, "What have I become myself? Like you sometimes got to look at yourself. You sometimes fall in love with things. You have no idea how you even, I would have never expected to start this ride with my daughter on Star Wars when the new,
Sure.
ones came out. Now, what I want to ask you too is because I love Boba Fett and I love Darth Maul. It seems like those are two that you gravitated towards. Is it because of you think the color? Because, or is it because I'm just going to ask this? A lot of times Lucas kills off his characters relatively quickly. And I know
Right.
they do animated series with Darth Maul and I think Boba Fett.
Sure.
Again, but in your case, people just seem to sometimes love a character that doesn't last that long. Sometimes, right?
Right. Well,
Um,
it's because they're more mysterious.
exactly.
Uh, you have a character that doesn't have a lot of screen time, but is very visually interesting.
Yeah.
And so that captures your imagination. And by not having that background and not having all those secrets revealed, it forms that curiosity.
Absolutely.
And yeah. And
It's
so
like
for
I
me,
always said, what's the backstory of these guys? How did they become what they
right,
became instead of kind of where they're going? Right? It's kind of like
right,
you
right.
want to know their
And that,
origin story, I guess you could say.
yeah, and that's a lot of the curiosity. And unfortunately, I think that the social media nowadays has really sort of killed the mysterious character
Mm,
in films, because everybody wants to know where Boba Fett came from,
right.
or how Darth Maul he got his tattoos, and how was he tempted by the dark side, and blah 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 blah. As a storyteller, um, in a storytelling medium, I tend to take things in the world that I'm looking at for granted. It
Hmm.
is what it is.
Sure.
Let's tell the story. But because a lot of fans tend to get fanatical, um, they want to see more, and I think that they're pressuring the companies to please them by going by demanding that they go back and tell these stories.
Sure.
At Dark Horse with the Star Wars license is that there are some things that Lucasfilm just didn't want to do, like give us a backstory for Boba Fett. Boba Fett was what he is, a bounty hunter. That's it.
Right.
Um, but the fans wanted more, and so eventually um, they did that. General Grievous, from the prequels, how did he get to be in that mobile skeleton? So they told that story. Um, and then obviously Lucas did it in the movies with the prequels, showing how Anakin became Darth Vader. But that was always his thing, I think, right from the start, was telling that story. But
That's the story. Yeah.
yeah,
It's
but
like The Godfather. It's Michael Corleone, and that's Anakin, right? I mean, that's his.
right,
It's his story.
yeah, exactly. And so for me, the biggest disappointment in the most recent films is that they weren't Anakin's story,
Mm,
and or excuse me, they weren't the Skywalker story,
I
Anakin
got.
and then Luke,
You're saying
because he
now,
obviously was
or
now with
the new current ones
the new current ones, the
with these
Last
guys,
Jedi. Yeah,
Kylo and that crowd. I
yeah,
got you. I was going to
yeah.
ask you
So
that. What
so
you think of that? Like, I was going to ask you
yeah.
that
Well,
actually.
well, for me, to be honest with you, I'm not
Hmm.
surprised, because once I heard that Lucas was selling to Disney, the first thing that came into mind was that Disney is going to jettison the old Star Wars and create their own characters in the Star Wars universe. And that's exactly what they did. And for us old guys who, Luke Skywalker, is the main focus, the Skywalker family, and then Lucas doing Anakin, building up to Luke in the second trilogy, and then Luke really not being even a major character in the new trilogy, was very disappointing
Mm,
for me as a Star Wars fan, because it turned to not the story of the Skywalker family. It turned into Luke being a smaller part of a story that didn't even really need to have him in it,
mm.
if you know what I mean.
Okay, yeah.
Um, but you know, it's not to say that I didn't enjoy the films. I certainly went into the films with an open mind,
Yeah.
and technically, you know, they were just as beautiful to look at as any of the other Star Wars films,
Hmm.
and you know, they were fun rides. But as far as having closure, really, to the uh, Skywalker family story,
Yeah.
I think they dropped the ball. Um, I would have liked to, and really, other than Disney wanting to make their own Star Wars characters, I think they had no concept of making a three-part film. They made three individual films that they tried to sort of shoehorn together in some type of arcing story that neither the first writer, the second writer, or even the third writer knew, you know, what was going on to make it that overall
Because
arch.
there's so much to an origin to those Star Wars films. You know,
Yeah,
you're not the only one disputing a lot of things. You know, you always hear what was right and what was wrong, the way they went about certain things. Did you
yeah.
like, for instance, Rogue One, Dave? Did you like that one?
To
Kind
be
of just.
very honest, of
Hmm.
the last five Star Wars that have been released in the past 8 years,
Yeah.
Rogue One is my favorite,
Yeah, I like
and
that one too.
and Solo is my second favorite.
I love
I
Solo too.
Yeah, I did as well, and I think that the major problem with that is too many people expected Harrison Ford or a Harrison Ford um, ripoff,
Yeah.
um, and they just couldn't take whatever the guy's name was. They
Hmm.
couldn't see him as Harrison Ford. But once again, I went into it with an open mind, as just it's Han Solo. It is what it is,
Yeah,
and I really liked the movie quite a bit.
I
It's one of
did
my
too.
favorites. Rogue One, after the original, you know, trilogy, you know, New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, Rogue One is just an absolute stunner of a
The
movie.
gem.
Uh,
The gem.
yeah,
I thought it was.
and you know, I would, because you know, I'm a big war movie fan too. So I mean,
Mm.
that was a big draw for me. But you know, they never really showed any of the war, this big galactic battle, in the Star Wars movies.
Right.
It was very character oriented, which is fine. But you know, it was such a breath of fresh air to see the war setting, and to see, you know, grunts actually on the battlefield,
Yeah.
and you know, all of these machines that you only see, you know, standing around really doing nothing, you know,
Yeah.
walkers and things. You see them really in some dynamic action, and man, that was a great movie. It really was, and I'm
I
hoping
like
that
it.
you know, I'm hoping that they would do some more of that. But you know, with the poor showing of Solo, which I tried to plug, you know, to everybody that I knew to go see it,
Hmm.
um, you know, you know, maybe they're rethinking that. Um,
I heard
but
on Disney Plus they're going to be doing a Rogue One series, very similar to
right,
Mandalorian. So
right. That's what I heard as well, and so that might be good,
yeah.
as far as opening up the world a little bit more. I personally think that right now we don't necessarily need continuous character stories. I mean, Rogue One showed that you don't have to have characters from any other movie uh, to be in a Star Wars movie to be a good movie.
Right. I got you.
You set it in a universe that people know, and show them something new. And
Exactly.
they did that with Solo too. My favorite parts of Solo were when he was in the military.
At the
You know,
beginning.
when he was on, yeah,
Yeah.
that was great. But I mean, that whole production was really good. You know, I have no idea what it looked like with the first director, but Ron Howard, you know, really did a nice job with what he was given, and you know, I was very happy with it.
Yeah. So with Mandalorian, for instance, are you incorporating your artwork any of your artwork, I should say, with that, because say for instance, I go to Epcot, because again, we live in Orlando, we go to the parks, and
Uh-huh.
when you go around the world or whatever the hell you're around the countries, they're having
Right.
more and more artwork similar to what you're doing. I'm seeing everywhere,
Right.
right? You can
Right.
buy
Yes.
all different photos regarding everything Star Wars. That seems
Right.
to be getting more and more popular, but there are also, I realize, Mandalorians being incorporated into that as well.
Well, yeah, that's a big thing for them, obviously, with the popularity of both the
This guy
series.
again,
That guy, the child, that
the
that
child,
that little
baby
one,
Yodis.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just the popular. Disney's not one to shrug off the opportunity to promote, something that's become very popular.
Yeah.
So the um, the artwork and other material that you see around Disney,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, that's something that I know quite a lot of artists who are doing those type of pieces. I have not done any, and I won't go into the reason why. Um, but it goes back to just me doing artwork, almost 40 years ago.
Yeah.
These are a lot of young guys that are out there, and they're doing the computer stuff, and it's all flashy, and I'm just not that type of artist anymore. I built my reputation on giving the fans, back then, what I considered, you know the artwork that they were looking for, and they responded by liking it and buying it, and letting the publishers know that that's what they wanted to see. But you know I admit that was many years ago, when there were maybe only 3 or 4 artists doing that.
Right.
So I was at the right place at the right time. Now you throw a stick at a convention, and you don't have to throw it far to hit another Star Wars artist. So I still do Star Wars art, but I don't do it primarily anymore. It's
Mm-hmm.
a piece here and there on occasion. A lot of my private commission stuff is Star Wars, because um, up to about 3 or 4 years ago, I never did commission work. I never did private work.
Gotcha.
So a lot of my fans who have been waiting, patiently over the years, are happy now that I'm opening myself up to producing, single pieces for the collectors. And so that's really where my effort has been going. Star Wars is a lot of stuff that'll never see publication, but it's hanging in my fans' living rooms and such. But I get calls of it occasionally to do something new for Star Wars. Um,
That's
I just don't have the flash and pompousness of what the young guys are doing on the computer.
sure.
I'm certainly old school. It's all traditional. It's no computer stuff.
That's
It's all
amazing,
paint and
though.
brushes. Yeah.
That's awesome. I realized too, and I was going to ask you that if someone can hire you to do something individually for them, because I notice you'll have like Darth Vader and Captain America in the same room,
Right.
right? You
Yeah.
kind of blend different worlds.
Yeah. The Darth Vader, Captain America, the Darth Vader Batman. I've done a couple of those just because I'm fans of those characters,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes, like with the first one that I did, the Darth Vader and Batman, I was actually, this was in the '90s. I was doing a Batman project, on one part of the studio, and a Star Wars project on another part of the studio, and so I just thought one day, well, wouldn't it be interesting to see those two together?
Collide.
And yeah, so I did the painting, and then it turned out a couple of years ago, some special effects guys made a short YouTube video of Darth Vader fighting Batman,
Mm.
a live action one with full sets and costumes and special effects.
Yeah,
And
I've seen the YouTube video on that as well.
yeah, so it turns out I met them in San Diego one year, and they said, they said my painting inspired them to come up with that. So that was very cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, but man, I saw that and I said, yeah, that they need to make a movie out of that. That was really cool. So
That was super
if
cool.
any of your viewers out there, just type in Batman versus Vader, on YouTube, and you'll come up with it. It's really, really good.
I saw that a couple times. People were sharing it with me. And back to my other question too: can people hire you to create something
Oh,
for them specifically?
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm doing that right now. Most of my work right now is private commissions, so it's just people contacting me either through Facebook at Dave Dorman Artist, or through my email, dormanart@yahoo.com. Um, and just, saying hi, can you paint this for me? What are your prices? You interested in doing, a Darth Vader painting? I'm very open and very flexible, and it's work that I love to do. So yeah, people, just anyone can contact me through either of those places, and I'm happy to respond, and get a little work out of it. Put a nice painting in a good home.
That's great. Did you ever consider creating your own characters, or have you already for your own paintings, or have you been just
Uh,
somebody who's basically duplicated what
Uh,
others created on
for,
film?
for most of my career, I've been a licensed artist, so I've done other people's creations: Aliens, Predator, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, GI Joe, Batman, blah blah blah, on and on and on. And that's been good. It certainly built my career. But being a fan of comics, and the creativity that goes along with sort of creating characters and storytelling, yeah, I have created some characters. In 2001, I did a graphic novel, 48-page graphic novel, story and art, called Rail, and it's sort of a science fiction western, that just was the things that I liked in general media. I'm a big
Hmm.
western fan. I'm a big Sergio Leone fan. I'm a big action movie fan. Uh, it's science fiction. Just all the things. I'm picking one here and one here and one here and putting it all in the story, and creating these characters. And so I did that. So I've been playing with those characters, since then. I haven't really created too much other material from it, uh,
Hmm.
because graphic novels take a long time to do, uh, and it's not my strong point, but it's my love of the medium that had me do it, and I'd love to do another one at some point. But I have created some other paintings featuring those characters, and have had some short stories published here and there with character art. The project is called The Wasted Lands,
Mm.
um, and I think the website's still up, uh, thewastedlands.com. So if people want to go to see it, it may not be. I can't remember if it's still up or not. It's because I haven't done that much recently with it. But it's still in the back of my head. It's still a lot of rich visuals that I'd like to get on canvas at some point, and there's still characters that I'd like to tell stories of. But it goes back to just my love of painting. My
Yeah.
love of Star Wars, and making the fans happy with creating art for them. And then I do my own artwork as well. There are things that I paint that nobody sees, that I do when I have my time. I like
Sure.
to paint. I like to paint railroad locomotives, believe it or not.
Oh yeah.
Big canvas pieces
Yeah.
of rusty old peeling paint, greasy locomotives. It's just fun to do for me. It's just just relaxing, and I love it. But
Yeah.
you know
That was my
that that had
backyard in Chicago. All locomotives, trains, everything. That was my
yeah,
backyard.
yeah. So there's no fandom for that, but I love it, and
Sure.
I'll do it. And maybe one day someone will say, "Hey, what else do you got?" And I'll say, "Oh, I got all these railroad paintings over here."
Yeah.
So who knows? But yeah,
With the
that's
caboose and
something.
everything.
Yep.
You do the
Yep.
cabooses and everything. I love trains because, like, I grew up in them. All I
Yeah.
heard was trains my whole life. Chicago,
Yeah.
obviously, being central, there's trains
Right.
everywhere.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I do other things. I do little paintings of lions and stuff that's
it's
not
great.
genre oriented. But my love of the genre comes from when I was very little.
Yeah, me too.
Looking at that artwork and
Me
just
too.
being awed by it, and it's stuck with me all of these years.
Yeah, I grew up with my dad. He loves film. We loved Bruce Lee growing up, and then he loved the movie Alien. Still his favorite movie of all time, Alien One and Aliens second
Right.
one as well. But I remember he took me to see Star Wars. And when your wife Denise said, "Hey, Rich, my husband, we go back and forth on LinkedIn. I get hit
Right.
up with a lot of people saying, "Hey, can you want to do this person on a podcast?" This, and I was like, "Hey, let me know if you know anyone." When she told me about you, I almost jumped out of my skin because I said, that's it's. I'm for selfish reasons. I do my podcast only with people that I'm truly interested in listening to. I'd hate to say it if I'm not interested in the
Well,
subject matter.
it's your podcast, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
but
that's
I'm all over the
where
place.
the excitement comes from. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm all over the place. I'll do something with fitness related, then I'll do someone like you, and the next minute, I could do something that's way off base. It could be a car aficionado, whatever I'm interested
Right.
in. But with
Right.
you, I said I can't wait to go down memory lane, and I was thinking even, with my father walking in to see Star Wars for the first time, we were late a little bit, so I was walking in, and Darth Vader was walking in at the same time because we had to find our. I just remember
Oh,
walking
right.
in, and I was so scared. I was almost mesmerized by this guy walking in.
Right.
And I remember seeing Star Wars. We walked out of there. My father, he went and got the album for me because he was a DJ on the nightclub and stuff. But
Right.
then
Right.
when the television show came out, well, they had that, with Luke and Leia, and so deflated. And I said,
Right.
"This isn't Star Wars. What is this?" And then when Empire Strikes Back came out, and I went and saw that at a birthday party. I think I must have saw it 3-4 times. I was so on the dark side of things anyways. I loved it. But I just loved that a film ended the way it ended because you never see the dark side kind of winning or the bad guy. Because I love bad guys. But
Right. Right.
it's just, thanks for bringing me down memory lane because I've been thinking about this
Oh.
for like the last 3-4 days. I couldn't even sleep last night. I was up till like 3:30 in the morning. I'm like, I don't want to sound like an asshole to this guy. Like I'm nervous.
Geez.
I want to make sure,
No,
anyways, it was just thank you for doing this.
that's fine. Oh, it's my pleasure. I love talking about Star Wars. It's been a big part
Yeah.
of my life. It changed me when I was a teenager. It changed the direction of how I saw my artwork. And I could never have thought after I saw the movie that I would actually be doing Star Wars artwork.
Yeah.
And when that happened in 1989, I was just stunned. And then to have it, 35 years later, I'm still, doing it.
That's why you're a legend, I told you.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I can't think of a better professional life to have had, and I'm still doing it, and I'm very happy.
Yeah, you look back, it's got to be an amazing ride for you, especially to see the journey you've taken and others as well in the film industry, television,
Yeah,
obviously literature, all these different things, how it's grown and expanded and touched so many people's lives. Where, like in my
yeah,
youth, I don't think a lot of us, like, I liked comic books. I wanted to be a filmmaker, but I had no idea on how to go about it because we just didn't have the information. It was almost magical, I used to say. Like people
right,
who made
right.
movies, it was magical. People who made comic books, I thought they were from another world. I'm like, what are these guys? Like, who are these guys? Where do they even come up with these stories, these characters?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
And
very, very good.
with the conventions, you get to meet them, and they're just regular guys
Yep,
who grew up with the same stuff, and just happen to have the talent to share new creations within that genre.
that imagination is just unbelievable. What people could
Yeah,
create.
yeah,
Oh yeah, for sure. And don't get me wrong, I love the Joker in DC, but I'm not a huge DC guy for the most part. And we all love Marvel for the most part. I mean,
right,
so
right.
we kind of left them out of this, but you incorporate that in your artistry as well, everything. So I don't want to think you're just Star Wars.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
I was really happy when DC contacted me. Their very first hardback book collection, the greatest Batman stories ever told. They contacted me to do the cover for that.
mm,
So I felt really honored that they would have me do that for their very first
that's great.
collector's hardcover. And then I did some other Batman work. I worked on some projects for Return of Batman, the second Michael Keaton film, Batman
Yeah.
2. And yeah, Batman. I didn't read him when I was a kid. It was later in life, I guess, when I was in high school that I started reading Batman. Got involved in reading the Neil Adams
Hmm.
Batmans, the ones drawn a little bit more realistically.
Yeah.
And then I started reading a lot of them. So Batman, obviously is my favorite DC character. Um, but yeah, I grew up with Marvel. I grew up with Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko and
Unbelievable.
John Buscema and Jim Steranko and these guys who are major influences on me artistically.
Yeah. Not long ago, I went and saw a movie, and they were handing out free comic books, and it was of the Joker. Uh, and I haven't brought a comic book in so long. I looked at it, and it was almost like something I forgot how much I loved. And when I was watching whatever movie I went and saw, I forgot what movie we were watching. I kept thinking about getting home to read the comic, and it was the Joker, and I love the Joker. And I remember I got home, we went to like a 10 o'clock showing, and it's like 12:30,
Right.
and my girlfriend saw me, and I just went immediately in the bedroom, and I laid on my back like a child, and I had to read the whole book. And I said, "My God, when did it end? When did I stop?" Because I remember giving all my comic books away when I moved to Florida to that
Right.
guy, my buddy Joe Chipetta, my buddy's brother, and
Right.
I don't regret giving him to him because I know he was a huge collector, and I knew I was kind of handing it off. But it's funny how you just kind of outgrow things. But I just to hold a comic book again, I just fell in love with it again, and I was carrying it with me everywhere. And I still think I may have it in my bag, but it's just in my eyes, it's just a part of my life that I just forgot how much I missed.
Right.
I look at them when
Yeah.
I'm in Barnes and Nobles or Books a Million. Sure, I look at comics, but it wasn't like I
Right.
had my own. Anyway,
Right.
I'm getting weird.
Yeah.
Anyway,
No, you're showing your love of a medium. That's good.
yeah. So that's all I got for you today, my man. Say
Okay.
thank your wife for me, and thank you so much for doing this. I can't thank you enough. I'd love to do a follow up one day.
Anytime. I'm always here. We make a joke that this COVID lockdown thing is affecting so many people. I'm sitting here in the studio every day. I don't go out. I'm by myself every day. It's the normal thing for me. So Denise and Jack, they're home all day now. They don't know what to do. I'm just
Right.
whistling and just doing my stuff.
At least it gave
So
you some time to maybe clear your mind a little bit, or you already were clearing your mind at home. You were always home anyways, doing art or traveling, right? For
yeah,
shows.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
It's nice to not travel.
yeah,
That's really a big bite out of time. So it's nice
that's my
not to
life.
have the conventions, and it's good that the internet has given people access. I do a live painting during
Hmm.
weekdays on Facebook, and so it's really given a lot of pleasure to a lot of my fans to be able to, just tune in Facebook and just watch me paint. It's not anything, any big deal, but I just turn on the camera and paint something. but it's taking the place a little bit of me going to a show and talking to fans.
That's great. And next time I want to go to each convention with you, because what my website on showbizservice.com, I'm not plugging it to plug it. I made it like 12, 13 years ago, which is to help people find comic books, graphic novels, and events.
Sure.
And I have a list of, I just pulled it up here, 33. I don't know what's still in business, whatnot. I'm looking at it from Phoenix to Tampa to, I'd like to go through Fan Expo, Dragon Con, Emerald City Con, Wizard World of Convention. I'd love to go through those with you and just maybe do a podcast strictly on your feedback, not in a negative way, but what you think each one kind of incorporates, what doesn't. Because I think a lot of people love going to those. Yeah, that'd be a blast.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Anything you want to talk about, I'm fine with. All right, if you want to just do movies someday, that's fine with me too.
Yeah, for sure. We'll go through a lot of stuff. All right, my man. Thank you again, and say hello to everybody for me.
I will do that. Denise is not home. She just ran out. I saw her drive away, so I don't know where she's gone. But I will let her know that things went well and appreciate that she hooked us up.
All right. Thank you very much. Take care.
All right. Have a good day. Be safe. Be well.
You too.
Okay.